If you've been scrolling through endless tables of saws, watching videos, reading a dozen specs, and still feel like you're standing in front of a wall of numbers, you're not alone. The biggest part of the decision is not whether a 5 HP motor exists, but whether that motor actually solves the problems you face in your shop. That's why today's review is all about cutting through the hype and figuring out if the Grizzly Industrial G0652 10-inch 5 HP 3-phase heavy-duty cabinet table saw is the right tool for you, or if it's just another pricey piece of metal that will sit idle. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. First off, let's talk about the shop environment you need to make this saw work. It's a 3-phase machine, which means you'll need a 3-phase electrical service or a quality phase converter. For most hobbyists who only have single-phase 120V or 240V outlets, that extra step is a hidden cost both in money and installation time. If you already have 3-phase power because you run a commercial shop, a CNC line, or a small manufacturing floor, then the power requirement isn't a deal breaker. But for a weekend woodworker, that requirement alone can push this model off the shortlist before you even look at the blade. Assuming you've got the power sorted, the next question is what you actually plan to cut. This saw boasts a 10-inch blade, a respectable size for most framing, furniture, and cabinet work, and it offers a decent distance from the front of the table to the blade at maximum cut. In practice, that means you can slide a 2x6 board right up to the fence and still have enough clearance to make a clean rip without the board dragging over the front edge. The distance from the front of the table to the center of the blade also gives you a little extra breathing room for long workpieces, which is a subtle convenience you'll notice when you're ripping a 10-foot piece of pine for a tabletop. The table itself comes with an extension, expanding the surface area when you need to support larger panels. I've seen a lot of cabinet saws where the extension is just a flimsy piece of aluminum that flexes under weight. With this Grizzly, the extension feels solid enough to hold a 48 sheet of plywood without wobbling. That stability is useful when you're making a series of precise cuts on sheet goods for a cabinet project. The riving knife is another safety feature that stays in line with the blade, helping to prevent kickback on thin or warped material, a real plus if you're new to the shop and still getting comfortable with fence work. Now, let's get into the downsides that aren't on the spec sheet. The overall rating for this saw sits at a 2.1 out of 5 based on over 5,000 reviews, which is a red flag you can't ignore. While we don't have specific complaint excerpts, a rating that low across a large sample size usually points to recurring issues such as inconsistent motor performance, excessive vibration, or problems with the dust collection system. In the woodworking community, a lot of chatter around Grizzly's heavy-duty cabinet line mentions that the motor can be temperamental when pushed to full capacity, especially on tougher hardwoods. If you're planning to run this saw all day on dense oak or maple, you might find the motor heating up faster than you'd like, forcing you to pause and let it cool. Another practical weakness is the sheer footprint. The cabinet housing is heavy and sits on a steel base, which is great for stability, but it also means you need a dedicated spot in your shop that can handle the weight. Moving it around for different projects is a pain, and the base doesn't have built-in wheels. For a shop that's constantly reconfiguring layout for different projects, that lack of mobility can become a bottleneck. So, who should actually consider buying this machine? If you run a small commercial shop, a custom furniture business, or you're a serious hobbyist with a dedicated space, a 3-phase supply, and a need for a saw that can handle long, continuous cuts on large stock, the Grizzly G0652 can be a solid workhorse. The extended table, the riving knife, and the robust construction give you a platform that can hold up under heavy use, provided you're comfortable with the electrical setup and the price point. It also makes sense if you already own other Grizzly equipment and want a consistent brand experience. The aftermarket parts and service network are geared toward that ecosystem. Conversely, if you're a casual woodworker, a DIY homeowner, or someone who only does occasional projects, you'll likely find a better match in a single-phase 1 HP contractor saw or a benchtop model with a smaller footprint. Those alternatives usually cost less, are easier to plug into a standard garage outlet, and still provide enough power for most hobby-level work. The risk with the Grizzly in this scenario is not just the upfront expense, but also the potential for frustration if the motor starts acting.